Well, today we got a little bit of a different video. I'm joined today by the American Moderate Party. He's got his TikTok handle there. Definitely going to get into a little bit of TikTok and YouTube here. So be sure to put the descriptions, and you can follow him there and all his handles in the box below. But yeah, let's just jump right into it. Let's start with TikTok, I guess, because it's the new up and coming platform. The organic reach is like nothing I've seen before. It's like Instagram when it first started.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I will say there seem to be a ton more bots and trolls to me on TikTok than other platforms. But yeah, how'd you get into TikTok? Why'd you download it? How'd you start the your profile and everything? And
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And first, thank you, man. I'm gonna just call you Pittelli because that's my favorite thing to call you. And
yeah,
because in a minute,
yeah.
thanks for having me on. And I always appreciate our conversations on TikTok. And how did I get on TikTok? Was ultimately the pandemic. And I think that's a lot of folks. I wasn't on there last year. I only got on there, I think it was in March, because I closed my business down middle of March to the public. And I was sitting there quarantined and thinking a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all had a lot of time to think. And I actually went on there and I was posting about some Bernie Sanders stuff and as you said about the trolls, right? So I posted a somewhat mundane, sort of everyday, like, hey, that's not a bad idea. And the fire that came from conservatives was I had, because I'm used to posting on Instagram, Facebook, whatever,
Yeah.
but it wasn't like this. And you're right that there's this amazing backlash from the opposition, if you will. And so I learned quickly, like, hey, if you post about, and then I put up like a post about my dog, that's Mac, Mac. He's the Secretary of State of the American Moderate Party. So I would post about Mac and get like no views, and then sometimes, and this was prior to when I changed the handle to the American Moderate. And actually, there's no party on the end of it, and that's to sort of give it less of that political edge. Although
Okay.
no, and that's fine. It's the American Moderate. Like the Patreon is also the American Moderate, so that people don't think they're supporting a political party yet,
Mm,
but it will be one.
okay.
So, and that's the plan, is to get it to be one, to actually register with the FBC. But I digress. So I would post about Mac, and I would post about something that was funny, and it would get a certain amount of views. But and this isn't about getting more views. It was more about saying something that people were seem to really care about. So when I
Yeah.
posted about political things, and I've always been an extremely political person my whole life, and I used to write for the college paper. I wrote a lot during high school, also that was somewhat controversial, and there was always a lot of support, and then there's always a lot of debate about what I believed in. And so it sort of was a natural thing that when I was posting about Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump, it was getting a lot of, first of all, interaction, but also I realized, like, hey, there's a lot of people that are listening and believing in what I'm saying about why I disagree or agree with a certain point. And it sort of brought me back to, oh yeah, you actually are really politically minded, and why aren't you really pursuing this as part of what you do on a daily basis? And I've really enjoyed it, and it's actually grown, for me at least, it's grown rapidly. And with Instagram, for instance, I started the American Moderate Party Instagram handle, and it's like, this puttering along, but
Yeah.
you would never get, like, I had something like on TikTok analytics, something like 1.3 million views in the last 28 days. And that's sort of, I think for you, probably you have the same sort of numbers or close, because it allows you to reach way more people if
For sure.
people interact with it well. And that just doesn't happen on Instagram unless you're paying them, or it just, there's no platform that allows what you say to potentially go viral, quote unquote, and create positive traction for your brand or your ideas. And that's, I think, why TikTok's become extremely popular.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It's like I said, the organic reach on that platform is it's like Twitter or Instagram when it was like first out. And
Right.
now, like you said, on Instagram and Facebook, you got to pay if to play if you want that kind of reach. Um,
Absolutely. Yep. By
and
design.
you just it's just how it is now. And on Twitter, you it's like, I've had a Twitter for, I don't know, probably years, and I'm just like pretty much localized in like the political sphere of Twitter. That's like all I use it for. Um, and all I have is like 60 something followers because it's just so hard to gain reach on those platforms now. And then, you know, TikTok is just, it's insane. Like I started, I don't know, maybe like 2 months, 2.5, 3 months ago. And I already like almost have like 4,500 followers. And like you said, your videos get so many views and the
Yep.
engagement is through the roof. Like people, you'll get, 600 comments on one post.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and every time you look at your notifications thing, it's like just says 99 plus. Like you
Oh
just
yeah.
know
Yeah.
it's getting a lot of traction. And it's it's got to be number one right now for building a brand and like trying to gain an audience to garner to do whatever you want to do with that audience.
No
um
doubt. Yeah.
the only
There's a lot of
thing
freedom. Yeah. Go ahead.
the only thing I will the one thing that kind of bothers me or worries me is like, it's Chinese owned. So I've been reading a lot of articles and seeing a lot of stuff about some of the information that the owner, the companies of TikTok has to kind of like fork over to the Chinese government whenever they want, pretty much. Um, which is a little worrisome, but at the same time, I mean, the government doesn't have our info on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, but they got tons of info on everybody. I just
Yeah.
think that at this in this 2020, in this climate, if you're alive, people have a lot of information on you because you have all these social media platforms.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a different age. My friend just started a Instagram and a Facebook for a kid, and I was like, man, don't. So first of all, Facebook's gonna be over in like 3 years, but that's something that I hope for, anyways. But it's a good point, right? And there's just so much information. Cambridge Analytica, for instance, what they did
Yeah.
really get Trump elected, to be totally honest. Um, it's amazing how much data mining can happen. And so when I look at the difference between TikTok, and I know that TikTok is trying to move towards using Google servers that are on American soil. Um, Maybe that'll convince people that it's not as bad. But yeah, I mean, it's a Chinese-owned company. The CEO is American. But when I look at the CEO of TikTok and what they could do with our information versus what Mark Zuckerberg does with it on a daily basis, I mean, you sniff on an idea on Google and it's on Facebook ads and Instagram ads within a minute. And I actually think they do listen. Like my ex girlfriend and I, we were talking about some weird obscure yoga mat, and neither of us had. She was a big yogi, and neither of us had ever used Google to search for it. We purely talked about it, and we were both sitting in bed, and we were scrolling through Instagram as you do,
Yeah.
before you go to bed. Now you scroll through TikTok.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it used to be Instagram, now it's TikTok.
Yeah.
But we both got an ad for that company, and neither of us had searched for it, and all we did was talk about it. So I think when you're talking about personal privacy, we don't have it anymore. Let's be totally honest. And if anything, we all need to really fight against the Earn It Act that I've posted on. I think you've also posted about,
Hmm.
where it's bipartisan. You've got Feinstein and the Connecticut senator, what's his name, Richard Blumenthal. And then you have Lindsey Graham, right, and some
Yeah.
obscure other GOP guy, and they're under the guise of child protection, which we all want child protection, and we want child pornography to stop. We want all that to stop, but they're saying that that's why they want access, and what it does is it just violates basically all of our privacy. So it allows them to search at any time, any app really. So basically, what it does is it tells the app producer or the company. Let's say it's Instagram. We need a backdoor that we can use at any time to pull any information down that we want, because we're investigating somebody for whatever. And right now there's encryption. There's all sorts of like WhatsApp has encryption, right?
Yeah.
Well, if this happens in America, WhatsApp basically would get sued if they don't allow uh, the the Earn It Act access point. And the way they're doing it is in a creepy way. They're actually saying like, hey, yeah, you don't have to give us a back door, but you're going to lose your section. I think it's 230 protection. I forget the number, but that section 230 protection means that if you run WhatsApp or if you're on Facebook, you're not liable for what somebody does on that platform. That's what that protection gives you. So if they say, okay, well, yeah, you don't have to give us a backdoor, but we're going to remove that protection, then if somebody posts something crazy on Facebook, Zuckerberg could get sued. So guess
Mm.
what he's going to do? He's going to provide that backdoor.
Yeah.
So they're indirectly forcing people to allow a backdoor, and it's under the guise of child protection. But I think it just opens a can of worms that like it puts um, the Patriot Act stuff to shame as far as accessing everybody's information at any time on
Hmm.
any app.
Yeah.
It's super dangerous. So long story short, sorry, that was a long story, but long story short is that this TikTok thing is it's the new normal. If you think you put something even right now, that's like what we're doing right now, is
Yeah.
going through a server somewhere for the company. I won't say what we're using, but so it's going through a server somewhere, and
Yeah.
uh, same thing with even Google Voice listening. In order for it to know that you even said okay Google, for it to pick up and be like, hey, now do a search, it needs to be listening all the time.
Yeah.
uh, Same thing with the Apple iPhone. I know these are things that but it's just sort of
Yeah.
it's
For
crazy.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. And everyone's got Google has found a way to just invade every single nook and cranny of your life, between your email, between
Yeah,
Google Maps, so they know where you're going, and
yeah,
then they can tie your name from your email to your Google Maps, so they know who is going where. And then you're searching for things on the internet through Google search, and a lot of times I heard it put this way with Facebook and Google. It's like Facebook is people show the world what they want to show the world, and Google is like truth serum. People type what they want to
yeah.
know into Google search bar, and it really just tells Google like what everyone really wants to know, like what they're really thinking. And then you throw all that together into YouTube, and they find out your interests because of what you're watching, and they have all this information on you. And if that wasn't enough, they put a bug in your home, and they're like, here's Google Home.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah,
oh
like
yeah.
there's no way to live right now without having your privacy invaded. You just have to accept it on just how it is.
It is, yeah. And the smart home, I worked in energy efficiency for years, for over a decade, and that was one of my major concerns about Nest and others was that they're data mining every. So one of the last vestiges that we have is our home. And so when products like Alexa came out and Nest that were monitoring by GPS radius whether or not you're home.
Hmm.
So it would say, hey, set my Nest to turn the heat on if I come off cycle back home, turn my heat on. So like
Yeah.
usually you have a schedule and it just turns on automatically by GPS. So, or you could set it to vacation. And I actually asked the manufacturer of, I won't say which company, when I was in the industry, I said, hey, what's your protection against hackers going in and finding out who's on vacation mode right now for what amount of time in your data so that they don't just go rob every home that says vacation on their thermostat right now?
Yeah.
And they didn't really have a good answer to that, to be honest.
That's
So,
not good. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, TikTok, in all this sphere, TikTok has really they've really just got to the top real quick. Because I have Instagram, I have a Twitter, I only have a Facebook because I own a business, and I strictly just have a business page on Facebook. And I actually got rid of my Facebook for years. And once I started my business up, I had to get it, because like people think you're not a legitimate business if you don't have a Facebook page. So
Absolutely.
I had to get it. I started it because of that, but I rarely use it at all. And then ever since TikTok came out, I've been barely using Instagram, like, at all. So
Same.
I've really just been using TikTok and Twitter. And the the time on site on TikTok is just like insane. Like you just can't put it down. It's so
Yeah.
addictive. They really did.
Yeah.
It used to be called something else. I forget what it used to be called. And then
Musically.
yeah, then
It was called Musically. Yeah.
yeah, and then they rebranded and everything and just came out like took over.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I same exact story on Facebook. I was an early adopter. I got it when I was in college when it first came out. It shows how old I am.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, so I think we're around the same age, and it's just, I was on there, and then all of a sudden one day I realized I was in my mid 20s, and I'm like, I have 1,000 or something friends, and I don't. They're all like from a bar one night, like
Yeah,
there's like 300 I care about. So who are these 700 people? I don't even. And then it just got really political, and then once the ads came in, once they did an IPO, you're like, this thing's done,
yeah,
because now they need to generate money for stockholders. This thing has lost all of its, any sort of, legitimacy that it had as being like this free flowing for the people app. Forget it. So then it became about money, and actually it's become about money in politics in a lot of ways right now.
yeah,
But I got rid of it too. And the only reason the ex, I should stop talking about my ex, but the ex was the one that got me back on, actually got me on social media at all. And I was doing it for bands that I was in at the time. And I wanted to do a promotion for a new song that I wrote. And I couldn't do it. And they're like, yeah, we want you to do this promotion. They kept telling me, like, promote this, you're getting a lot of views, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, yeah, cool. Oh, you want to promote it? You got to link it to your Facebook. And I was like,
uh,
oh, shit. So they forced you to have an active Facebook, and that had to tie. And so basically, in order to do Facebook or Instagram ads for the band, I had to have a Facebook, and then the can of worms. And then I started the brick and mortars, which you have to have Facebook because most of the boomers, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but my own parents are only on Facebook.
yeah,
And if you want to do an ad that's going to work for a brick and mortar, especially in a localized area, Facebook is it, because you're targeting the boomers that are on there. And then you use Instagram and TikTok. And I do actually use Instagram quite a bit for one of my businesses because it's pretty good with the stories. I get a lot of interaction on stories.
yeah.
And posts, I get a few hundred views on a post and like 100 likes or whatever. And that's pretty good. And it's local, um, but it just does. It'll never have the reach of unless you pay.
Yeah, yeah.
It'll never have the reach of TikTok. It's just there. It's untouchable. They're totally different worlds.
That is true. That's so like think about like TikTok and Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. The only one that the boomers are really on is Facebook.
Right.
They're really, I mean, there's probably some on Twitter, not many. If they are, they're like some sort of celebrity or they have a business or, they're an intellectual or something like that. But of all the top platforms, the only one that the boomers are on like hardcore is Facebook. Yeah. And that's probably
Yeah.
why you really, if you have a business, you need to have a business page at least on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's one of the only, I mean, it's probably one of the only things keeping Facebook afloat right now is all that. Because I know was it the Zoomers, the ones after us, they're not on Facebook at all. They
No,
can't
they hate
stand
it, yeah, and it's glitchy as hell. But like, does anyone else realize that Facebook just doesn't work? Like ever, it never works. Like you try to go through 3 pages and you're lost into some abyss of glitchy shit. That doesn't.
yeah,
Am I allowed to swear on this? I swear a lot, by the way. So, but I'll try not to.
yeah, yeah, that was
Um,
cool.
so yeah. Either way, you're right. And I did a TikTok post about the Zuckerberg Island issue in Kauai, and I know we had interacted on that one, and that had some traction. But also the Facebook in general, I posted about how I think we should just get rid of it, and like basically just say, hey, let's just all stop using it. But the reason why it will survive is boomers, and it's not a negative thing. It's just like they're not going to change at this point. They're not going to be like, oh
No,
yeah, let me restart my entire social media life that I just finally got comfortable with.
yeah,
Let me go ahead and delete that and start again. No, it's not
yeah.
happening.
Learn a whole new platform too. Yeah,
No,
that's
yeah, that's
not gonna
just so
happen.
they're all gonna be on Facebook. And I actually thought about it, like, man, if I leave Facebook for real and like permanently delete, there's a lot of stuff with my mom and dad on there that I don't want to lose. you know.
Yeah.
So and it's not like you can just hit download all, or maybe
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah. You would think they would put that feature in there, but like you said, when you
Maybe
get
don't
lost,
leave.
yeah, you like anytime you try to fix something like in your settings or your privacy on Facebook, it's like 7 pages deep, and you end up getting lost and you can't find what you're looking for. Yeah. Yeah.
Nah, yeah, it's all
Yeah.
by design. I mean, they've got people working overtime to make it not easy to use. To be honest, they want you to only see what they want you to see, and then I say they, but it's like, yeah, why isn't it easy to do the things that are all the most pertinent, that are all the things that we want to do 90% of the time? They're all hard to find.
Yeah. We need to cancel Facebook. So we need to
Yeah, well, yeah,
do.
true.
Yeah. Yeah, but speaking of the canceling, this cancel culture stuff that is kind of running amok here. It seems to
Yeah,
come from my perspective, it seems to come more from the left, but it definitely comes from the right as well. Like the biggest one to me that people just, I don't know why they don't connect the link, but the right tried their damnedest to cancel Colin Kaepernick. Like they tried to
yeah,
cancel Colin Kaepernick. So like a lot of
yeah,
people on the right will say, only the left does this, and that's not true at all. The right does it plenty. They tried to cancel Mitt Romney when he came out against Trump in the impeachment when he, so they engage in it. I'm not sure just as much, but they engage in it to the same level. They're trying to cancel. It just doesn't work. You can't cancel a sitting senator.
yeah,
And Colin Kaepernick, he definitely got canceled in the NFL. That might have more to do with the kind of publicity he would have brought for a backup quarterback. So maybe a lot of teams didn't think he was worth the juice wasn't worth the squeeze kind of thing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but the right definitely engages in it. The left just doesn't more, I think. You see it more on, college campuses. You see it more where they try to cancel celebrities or politicians, and then you'll get it the real like insidious nature of cancel culture to me though is it scares people into not talking. So
yeah,
there's a lot of really smart people who we would really love to join the conversation on these really touchy topics like race and police brutality and transgender right and all these things that we would really love their input because they're real smart, but they're just afraid to touch these topics with a 10-foot pole because if they slip up, their reputation's gone or their job is gone. I mean, there's a recent article in the Atlantic, and it goes over about like regular average Joes who have kind of done very innocuous things and gotten canceled. They got fired, um, and that is worrisome because when it happens to like an elite, like when it happens to Colin Kaepernick, he'll be fine. He's rich, he's got connections. At the end of the day, he'll be okay. But when John loses job because a tweet he wrote a year ago, that's to me when it starts to get a little troubling.
yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with you. It can be, it's a double-edged sword, no doubt. And when I look at it, the reason why people that are famous are hesitant to stand up is is money, and that's not a knock. It's just money. Because like I was shocked when Michael Jordan this year stood up and said something publicly about police brutality, not police brutality, but like police reform, and said like, "Hey, something's got to give on this whole racism thing."
Hmm.
And he is a global brand,
Yeah.
and so he never says anything. And LeBron James is you know the second best basketball player ever, I'll say. But that's not a knock on LeBron. He's amazing, but he sometimes will stand up more. But he's sort of like, dude, he's learning that and this is the sad truth, is that for anybody who speaks up, you're alienating in this time, in this day and age, you're alienating 30 to 40% of the population at least.
Yeah.
And when your business is to market yourself as someone that's good for everybody, you won't stand up and make a point unless you're purely altruistic and you're like, you know what? I don't care, and and that was Colin Kaepernick, for instance, saying I might lose my job, and I'm standing up for what's right. He'll be famous forever. He will be, and it's not about fame, but he will always be recognized in the history books. Um, I think the reason why he's not on the team right now, and I'm a huge NFL fan, Buffalo Bills. I'm a huge Bills fan. Um, is the ownership of the teams is almost all really conservative white men, and many of which are donors for Donald Trump. So they know that if they are the team that and I'm not a big conspiracy guy, but there's definitely again that an alienating of their 30 to 40%, and in some cases, like a team like I don't want to be derogatory about a team, but a team's fan base might be very upset about it, and that costs that team money, and that's just sad, but it's true. And on the cancel culture, that Harper's Magazine article came out where and I actually posted about this one that there was a bunch of people that signed on, Noam Chomsky, people I respect, Fareed Zakaria, and they're like, hey, cancel culture is bad. And uh, and then there's a whole rebuttal from people saying, no, it's actually a good thing that people can consolidate and rally around an opinion. And TikTok, oddly, is probably the best way that, or this the vehicle right now that's moving it, the majority of this sort of canceling of people, and Twitter also, I'd say. But when you look at the rapid nature of of how TikTok can go viral on a topic, it's amazing how much impact it can have. So I just think that the main issue why people are opposed to the cancel culture stuff, in my opinion, that are people in power that are afraid of the fact that like there is there are repercussions now that are almost instant
Yeah.
if people rally. And I think you're right about the right and the left both do it. I think that the left has been more artful and better at it. Is probably why you see it more. Um, so I think it's really that maybe the left is just doing a little bit of a better job rallying their troops, or maybe they're just more passionate about the topic.
Yeah.
Whereas like the right is like, yeah, we all agree, but it's like, it's just a nothing burger to them, and they're not gonna, they're not gonna really like stand up and not buy beans because it's like whatever to them. So
Yeah,
hard to
yeah,
say.
yeah. It's like it's a tool. It's a tool that we can use, cancel culture. If we use it correctly, it can be done very well. And then if you get overzealous with it, you can be canceling people for pretty innocuous things that they've done in the past, or even just said, or even just like a off-color joke, and then you're trying to just take away their entire livelihood. So we just have to watch how far we go with it. And
Yeah.
then like a good example of it, is canceling like all the Confederate monuments and statues. Like they should be canceled. They should be
Yeah.
canceled. But I don't try to argue that point from the fact that they were just racist, because that means you could cancel anyone literally from probably like 1800 on. Like who so
Yeah.
it's just, it's not an argument that's going to hold up to other areas. So in terms of like the Confederate monuments and statues, they really, they lost. So they lost. You don't They're always crying about second place trophies. I'm not sure why we still have monuments and statues up. Two, they were traitors to the nation that we all still live in. They
Right.
sought to destroy the country that we're all still citizens of. And then three, there's two different things. So you have like, Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, and then you have like General Lee. There's a difference between honoring a man because of their sins and honoring a man despite their sins. And
Mm.
that's the difference I see between, Lee, what he's honored for, and then Jefferson, what he's honored for. Now, it's not to say that Jefferson, didn't do things that today we would be like, oh my God, it's awful. Of course he did. But that's not the reason those aren't the reasons he's known. Those aren't the reasons we honor him. Those aren't the reasons we have monuments of him still up. Uh,
Right.
I don't think that,
Yeah.
the Confederate statues shouldn't be haphazardly torn down by angry mobs. It just doesn't look good. I think it plays into the hands of the right, actually. Um,
Yeah.
I think they should be taken down, by construction crews, professionally removed, put them on in a museum if you want, or not, whatever. Have the local municipalities vote on it, and then go on from there. But they definitely should all come down 100%. I don't see. I've never been told like a cogent, persuasive argument as to why they're up.
Yeah, I mean, there was during. I totally agree with you that they should be taken down, with one exception, which I'll let you know about in a second. But Richmond, how Richmond did it, for instance, right? So they put them in museum. They're going to put them in museums. I think the majority of them off of that sort of statue, that the Isle of, I forget what they called it, but it was basically an aisle down the center of the city, that had a bunch of monuments. And yeah, you don't want to honor those people publicly. And they were actually used to stoke some fear in minorities, and were looked at as like, if you're not white, like, this is what we idolize here. So they
Yeah,
tried to, enable slavery to still exist, to, forever, and they wanted it to stay. And so you look at it as we're celebrating people who not only were, traitors, to be completely, not to be, not inflammatory in any way.
yeah,
They wanted to secede from the nation. So yeah, they fired first. Well, there's a debate, but they technically attacked first. Not that it's a he said she said thing or whatever, but
yeah,
yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me that we would still have these up when they stand for, very clearly, because there's not much else that they could stand for outside of a military group that tried to separate from the United States. And their main, and in their own constitution, it says that it's about slaves. It's not, it's in there about having, that we want to have slaves, and this is why we're doing this. It's part
yeah,
of their case. So there's really no debate that it was about slavery, and there wasn't really a lot of other ancillary things. And to be honest, they needed the North too in a lot of ways. It's a very bizarre time in our history, but I mean, you're right. Jefferson had slaves. All of the founding fathers had major problems as far as in today's context. If you were to
mhm,
look at them today, you'd be like, well, these aren't good people at all. But I mean, you got to frame it as, what was the current situation in the United States? Were they the best of what humans were in America at that time? I'd say probably,
yeah,
or some of the best. I don't know that 100%, but because I didn't know everybody then. But
mhm,
and then you look at like a guy like Abe Lincoln used to frequent, some brothels. It's like
yeah,
these guys are all great guys all the time, but what
yeah,
they achieved with their lives was very important and impactful. And if you zoom out on their policies that they created, or their legislation and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, it's remarkable, especially because at that time there were no republic democracies run by and for the people. That was
yeah,
new
yeah,
then.
yeah,
Like people are like, oh well, yeah, that came about in there's other democracies now, so they must have been kind of like following the trend. No, they were the trend, and
yeah,
they broke the ground. So these guys are amazing in what they did. There's some reasons behind why they did what they did that I don't always agree with too, but in the end, we got a really good, strong constitution, and the amendments have been strong as well from that point forward, to create more equity, I think, in the United States for the people. And I think we're at a crossroads right now where, and we can talk about this more, but there's a lot of things under threat that are
yeah,
not intended by that Constitution.
yeah,
What I'll say about the statues is, the one place, or there's a couple places where I think it's okay, not maybe all of them, but where I think it's okay to have some of these monuments up. And a place like Gettysburg, for instance, where there's monuments to people that were there at that time from both sides. I think in those instances where it's a living memorial, it's actually where the battle happened, and it's talking about the people that were there. I think there's a case that can be made that it can be done right. But the counter to that is that a lot of those monuments were erected in the 40s, I think, like way after the war, at Gettysburg
yeah,
specifically. And they were erected because they're like, it was very much Confederate, waving the Confederate flag, sort of, anti African American, anti minority reasons behind erecting some of them at Gettysburg. So I'd say keep the ones that were original to the battlefield at that time, or soon after that war, that were like, here lands, what happened at this point on the land, kind of monuments, that are not glorifying either side, outside of just saying, here's a historical record on where it all occurred. So but again, this is all really hard to line up so that it's fair. And I'm sure
Yeah,
people on the right, they don't agree with them being taken down at all, and I couldn't disagree with them more. So
yeah, yeah. I can see that because, like you said, it's more of like an open air museum,
yeah,
Gettysburg in general. So yeah, and I don't think anyone's against putting them in museums. If that's where they want to put them, that's perfectly
that's what they
fine.
did in Germany. Same thing in Germany. You've got Nazi symbols, but they're not out on the street. They're in a museum, and they're used for educational purposes.
Yeah,
And they're forced into the proper context by the facility that they're in. Is
yeah.
how
And it's funny you mentioned that in the Constitution, in the South's Constitution, the Confederates, I think that is the only difference from the American Constitution is that they put in there that they have the right to keep and own slaves. I think that's the only
yeah,
difference. I mean, I don't I just like fact check me on that, but I think that is literally the only difference.
I wouldn't
So
be surprised. Yeah,
it, like you, I just don't. When you'll see people talk about how it's their heritage and they have to keep it up and blah blah blah. Like I can't see that argument. It's just it's not it's and these are the same people too. At the same in like the next breath, they'll go on about American patriotism, but you're waving the flag of a country that wanted to destroy America. So it just
yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
And what's odd is they're actually all waving like the Tennessee Confederate battle flag. They're not even
Yeah,
waving the actual. There's two versions of the Confederate flag. I actually posted a video on that. It got pulled because I said some language in there that was funny. I thought,
yeah,
but apparently TikTok didn't like the language I was using, but it was funny. And but it was basically the one that we all look at, the star and bars that you see at NASCAR, flying over the recent race, by the way, which is like crazy. They flew the Confederate flag over the race when the NASCAR just banned it.
mhm.
And that could have been a private person. Obviously, it's not like endorsed by NASCAR, but somebody with a
Yeah,
plane was like, "Dude, I'm flying this thing right over," and like whatever. But that's whatever. But I mean, the main thing is that's not even the Confederate flag. There was two Confederate flags, and neither of them looked like that. That is actually, it's funny. There's second flag. I feel like it looks almost like a surrender flag with the star and bars in the top left corner. Weird. It's white, all white with just the star and bars in one corner. So, anyways, it's just why would they use the Tennessee battle flag? I don't get that and why they rallied around that one. But that flag was like a nothing for a long time after the war until it came in the 40s and 50s with the racism that was rampant around the country is when that got popularized again. So you're like, well, if this wasn't really being used by hardly anyone as a historical reference of why we're so proud of losing the Civil War,
yeah,
why did it have this tremendous resurgence as a flag that would be worn by those who were pro-slavery and anti, or they were pro-racism or they're pro-white folks. I don't even know how to say it in a proper way without being like
yeah,
just pro racist. I don't know. It's yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then in if you could think of anything that's more ironic, actually, is those same people who are for the Confederate flag and for the Confederate monuments at the same time think themselves the most patriotic, and then they go and they all, by and large, support Donald Trump. So it's
Mm.
just like a hodgepodge of just like so much cognitive dissonance, like it just blows your mind. And then
Yeah.
you have the whole Trump phenomenon and how it is now. It's basically, to me, it's a cult. It's a cult. It's a cult of personality. It's not a political party. They have no political leanings besides to a man, to him, and it's wild. It's dangerous. It's frightening, and there are a lot of people on TikTok and all over social media who have made like a cottage industry out of grifting off of it. Um, and Trump he's made grifting great again. I guess he has really he's
Snake
allowed
oil. Yeah.
he's allowed these a lot of these people to just create and build a platform off of him and all his nonsense, and it works. And some people have made an entire career off of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you that it seems to be a cult because there doesn't seem to be, there are some genuine supporters that I personally know, and I don't agree with them, but I'm like, oh, well, I know they're not obsessed with just him.
Hmm.
Uh, but they're more anti, like they're not pro Trump, they're like anti Joe Biden,
Mm.
and I'm like, well, if you're gonna back somebody, don't you want to like really support what they stand for? And it's like, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
but then the vast majority, at least the loudspeakers, that you see out there, the majority of the people that you'll see on social media and at rallies, obviously, and on the media side of things, including Fox News, that are pro Trump, seem to spend most of their time as apologists saying, oh yeah, well he didn't mean that, or that didn't mean that, or that was taken out of context because of this thing way over here that's totally unrelated, or Obama did it, or it's like Obama did everything except for give Trump the best economy this country's ever had. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's a lot of economists that will agree with it. That was one of the best economies we've ever had,
Yeah.
and and it was handed to Trump, and Trump started deficit spending right out of the gate. And the first 3 quarters of his presidency were from Obama's, budget. But then after that, he owns that budget. He had an all red Senate and House majority on the
Yep.
GOP side and the presidency in 2018 when they did that next budget. Sorry, 2017 Q4 when they did that first budget and that got approved. So, and then that created at least 2.5 trillion of debt in the first 3 years, and then the pandemic, and then let alone all the legislative impacts that came from his tax cuts that will put us in massive debt for over a decade every year. So it's his deficit spending with the best economy basically took the money that we could have had, or at least like you want to have reserve cash, and especially when you're doing really well, you don't want to just slam the gas and give people more breaks, which is what he did. And people are like, look at how great the economy did. Well, it's like, yeah, because things were already good, and then he threw cash at rich people and corporations.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
gave us all. He gave us all a little bit of money too. Yeah, we all got a little bit, like, but a lot of upper middle class people lost a ton of money
Yeah.
because the housing write off at 10 grand max. I mean, there's a lot of people that are people that were pretty well to do, but not super rich, that are getting really screwed by all the new tax laws. And I think Trump's in for it, actually, on that one. That's probably that voting bloc is influential, well educated, multiracial, and they are all getting screwed. And they're the people that all make probably combined like 200K to 300K, like between the couple, and they're
Yeah.
probably doing around that. And they're all paying way more taxes, and they're not happy about it, and they vote. So yeah, but I think in general you're right about the Trump thing, that it's sort of like he can do no wrong when he very clearly is incorrect. I mean, it's hard to not sound like hyperbolic talking about how he's wrong on a daily basis on basic fundamental principles that we believe in, or that are historically Americans and our presidents, what they've done. He's broken social mores on a daily basis, and there's really no. It really is like watching a reality TV show, and I know that's like
Yeah.
everyone says that, but it's true, and I do think he never stopped campaigning, because when he got elected in the first quarter of 2017, he was back out on the trail
Yeah.
campaigning, and I remember being like, "Why are you out at a rally? Like, why are you having a rally to celebrate winning?" And then he hasn't stopped. I mean, all he's done is and then he's brought in people into his cabinet that many of them at the beginning were actually talented, and
Yeah.
he's blown them all away. And so he's like achieving hardly anything. Uh, I mean, we could talk about it forever about how there's so many misnomers about what he's gotten done that I truly believe are massively destructive to our future, especially the deregulation that's happening. Because
Yeah.
deregulation like pollute, just pollute. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Yeah, you're gonna
Yeah,
make more money. You're gonna make a hell of a lot more money when you don't have to do anything right as a
yeah,
corporation.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's had quite a few environmental rollbacks for sure of
Yeah.
regulations that are just awful for the environment. Um, and then it really it can't be. I don't think it can be overstated enough just how like just dangerous of a man he is for the country. And what gets me is I don't understand how one can be consider themselves like an informed American who is trying to do best for this country and still support him if you're in tune to what's going on. So like there's really only three reasons I think you can I used to think there were five, but now there's only like three reasons that you still support him. You're just ignorant and you for whatever reason you don't pay attention to it enough. You have your own life, you're not into politics, whatever it may be. And you think things he's better than he is because you just don't know. And then another one is you're just grifting. You're trying to make some sort of following off of it, and with social media that can turn into dollars if you do it well enough. And
Like
then
Nick
three,
Video.
yeah, and then three is I would say is you're just like him. You're just like him. So you're either not entirely intelligent enough to be having these conversations in these debates, and you don't really understand what's going on. You don't understand government and policy and history and philosophy, and it's over your head. And but you think you do, and that is just like him. That is Donald Trump in a nutshell. And it just it blows my mind that people that like probably 40% of the country vote of the voting citizens are going to vote for him in November.
Yeah.
And this man has just you could just run off a litany of things that he has completely screwed from the second he stepped into office. And then you have COVID-19, and I don't think there's any way you can argue that he's done a good job on this. It's been awful. So like, you have 140,000 people dead. We don't know how many of those people are attributed to him and his administration just completely mishandling it, but some percentage are. There are some number, probably in the thousands, who would be alive if we handled this better. I don't think you can
I'd say
argue the
obviously
other way.
10. Right. Yeah.
So, and just knowing that alone, like that's enough. Like you're gone. Like you can't get reelected. You're gone. And then you have him still coming out now saying, basically saying that he testing we have numbers high because we test more when he doesn't understand. It's like like I should have just told every professor in college like, well, I only got a bad grade because you tested me. Like, yeah, but
Yeah.
you still
Yeah.
didn't know the information, man. So like you still didn't know they're still sick whether you test them or not. It's still
Right.
spreading. And
Yeah. Yeah.
he's it's just it's gotten to the point where it's frightening because I live in Florida, and it's like it's the epicenter of the world right now.
Yeah.
We're going to pass New York at some point. Like I think today we had like over 12,000 cases. The last
That.
2 days we've almost had 100 deaths.
Yeah.
Um, and we're third in the nation now in terms of total cases, and we're like fastly creeping up on California. And
Yeah.
DeSantis down here is riding Trump's coattails in the office. He doesn't care. He hasn't closed the damn thing down. He's just completely keeps saying dumb thing after dumb thing. They're going to open schools in a month. Uh, it's just insane. I think unemployment in Florida is like almost 15%.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I'd say. I mean, there's where I mean, I'm in the northeast part of the country, and as you know, but some folks watching this might not, is that I own small business. I own two now, and they're brick and mortar. No one financed me. This is out of my own money, and I need business to be open. But we paid early and often when this first came out, and everybody played ball in the northeast of the country and said we're going to try to fix it. The populace, I should say. You can say what you will about the governors and how they operated, but overall the public reacted in a strong way to really get it under control in the northeast. Um, and that was before all the vacationing and snowbirds and everything, which is going to cause a lot of transmission now.
Hmm.
because while the Northeast was blowing up and then they sort of got it under control, um, if other parts of the country controlled their smaller outbreaks at that time, then we could have all been over it. In fairness, like, and California has its own problems, but it's like the fifth largest economy in the world. It's tough to control all of California when it's
Yeah.
bigger than almost every country in the world. But you know, I think we could have had it under control. And now you've got now communities that never, it seems like never did anything. Like while we're all wearing masks and like quarantine and our businesses are totally F, and we're sacrificing because that's a sacrifice. I want to be making money. I
Yeah.
don't
Oh
want to
yeah.
be closed,
Yeah.
and it's like I want to be making money. So I sacrifice to allow this virus to hopefully get defeated. And then other people didn't. Other people
Hmm.
didn't sacrifice. They said F it.
Yeah.
So then we now might have to close. I don't know, but we'll see. But places that never did anything and no hard work. I don't want to wear a mask 8 hours a day, but I do every day, and I work pretty much 7 days a week. Um, in fairness, pretty much 7 days a week. So 8 hours a day with the public. So the moral of the story is now if we get, and especially the restaurant industry around where I am, where people are coming from other areas of the country and are like, screw it, we don't care. They're like, yeah, no, you better care because you know what? I want to still be open in the fall.
Yeah.
And if you F over our community, and if you don't fix it where you are, by the way, go home and fix your problems.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're screwing the economy. So, I mean, Donald Trump is one thing, and he's responsible indirectly uh, for many more deaths than I think we needed to have, by not being direct with the people, and I think not being a leader. Because if he was saying to his followers that we both agree are sometimes just following whatever he says, no matter if it's right or wrong. If he said wear a mask and do the social distancing, and I want you to do that, they would have likely done it,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
they would have felt proud about doing it. They would have said, "Yep, I'm doing this for my president." And I'm like, "Hey, I'm all about it. Yeah, do it. Do it because you're a patriot. Do it
Yeah.
because you want our economy to get better. Do it because you want America to be this great nation that it is, and stay that way." And if he says stuff like that, then his followers would have followed that direction, and we would probably be over it now.
For
And
sure.
we're
Yeah.
not. Instead we're blowing up out of control. And we could be facing, in Florida especially, I think you could be facing a shutdown if things don't get better. And I mean, it's unbelievable to everyone to
Yeah.
watch this train wreck. It's a
Yeah.
train wreck.
It's like a slow motion train wreck. It's
Yeah,
the with Trump too. It's like all he really had to do is really just get out of the way. He could have had
yeah.
Fauci. He could have had all the people in the room who were 10 times smarter than him, and just get out of the way. Let them do their jobs. Do the pressers like a normal person. Don't attack the press. Try to like uplift people's spirits. Let the scientists and the doctors talk. Let them give the direction, and you just agree with it. But
He
he's
couldn't do it, man.
capable of doing that, like because he's such a narcissist. He's
Yeah.
incapable of doing something like that.
You
So
know what it was? Here's what. Oh, sorry. Go on.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna. You know what? Exactly what happened, and everything you just said is right on point. And exactly what happened was he's like, I don't want to deal with this coronavirus BS. Pence, Mike, you're on it. You do it. You fix it. Because he didn't. He thought it was gonna be a nothing deal. He's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
whatever. And I think he truly believed himself,
yeah,
and I think most sociopaths do, but or pathological people do, that they would just believe, whatever they make up. But so he basically says 15 people would be down to zero. I think he truly believed that, but that was totally ill-advised. But what I will say is he puts Pence on top and says, "You take care of it. I'm gonna be over here doing my thing." Then Pence actually starts doing a good job of doing it, of managing it. And people are like, "Oh my God, it looks like we almost have a president, but it's not the president," you know. And then he starts getting positive attention. Same thing with Fauci. Fauci comes on, and people are like, "Oh, a responsible adult. I like this. I like this." And so Pence and Fauci and Deborah Birx and a few others started to get positive press, and he immediately jumped in on a daily daily TV show, basically. And remember, in the middle of it, he's like, "I might do a Rush Limbaugh 2-hour episode every day."
Yeah, yeah,
And I actually posted on that.
yeah,
I'm like, this guy, our president, now wants to have a daily talk show.
yeah,
Like, what? What? It's impossible to understand that it is so far away from what we would consider presidential. And I think the damage that's being done right now, and then I'll stop. The damage is that there's an entire generation, and thank God for Gen Z, because they're actually stepping up and saying, "Hey, we don't agree with this craziness." But there's a whole generation growing up thinking lying is totally fine,
yeah,
like it's fine. Like there's nothing. Don't worry about it because it's just something that you do when you don't like something. That the president can do whatever the president wants, and that the truth and the facts no longer matter, and that the president is more powerful than the president actually is. And that's not good. So this generation is going to grow up with this, not what I grew up with, I'll say. And they're going to have this weird world of like, what is the president supposed to be like? Because they've just been watching. I mean, what we almost all, what about 60% now of Americans agree is just total train wreck and isn't good for the country.
yeah,
Um, and now that's the new norm. And the thing that I can't, like a while ago, is like there's a bridge that we crossed with this president, and it's because the GOP sort of enabled this to happen. But it's like once you decide that you can just lie and get away with it, and you sort of accept that that's just what it is, and you once you cross that bridge, you're not pouring that, you're not getting back on the other side. You can never go back. It's spilt milk, and you're not getting it back in the glass. And at that point, the entire future has changed, and I think we've experienced that now. That politicians are now gonna lie more than they ever have. They've always lied a lot, but now it's like it doesn't even matter.
yeah,
If basically if I'm not going to jail because if it's not illegal, if it's not written down that what I just did is illegal, then I can do it.
yeah,
It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's like if I'm not going to jail for what I'm doing, even if it's a horrible thing, I'm doing it because
yeah.
whatever it benefits what I want to be, I want to do that, and it benefits something over here. So it's not illegal. Fuck you. Excuse me. I
Just
should stop swearing.
completely, like, just completely devoid of any morals. Yeah. It's
Right.
funny you say that too about because Trump yesterday he was interviewed by Chris Wallace on Fox, and
Oh yeah.
Chris asked him like directly like his quote where he said, it's 15 people, it's going to go down to zero. It was either that quote or the quote where he said, it's going to disappear. And
Yeah.
Trump's response to Chris asking him that, Trump's response was, "Well, I'll eventually be right. I'll eventually
Yeah.
be right." So it's just like
Yeah.
it's just I don't know how anyone with like a rational working brain can look at that and be like, yeah, that's the guy I'm going to vote for president. And then they try, going on to the election and getting onto Biden. Now their only attack on Biden is they're trying to make him out to be like the next coming of like Joseph Stalin. They're like socialism is going to take over, and you're going to be waiting in bread lines 2 years into Biden's presidency, and he's a radical leftist who wants to push the Green New Deal like AOC. Like that's their only attack now, and that's what they're going with. And
Yeah.
Trump in the same interview was saying about Biden that Biden wants to defund the police, and Chris Wallace was like, he doesn't. He actually doesn't. It's on his website. He doesn't want to do that, but he kept saying it, and then Trump got like fed up with it. It's actually the best interview I've seen a journalist do with Trump the entire
Yeah.
like last 5 years. And
Yeah. It was. Oh, yeah.
but yeah, they're just they're trying to. And then the other thing with Trump, like you'll get Trump doesn't say this, but a lot of his supporters do. They'll say like, "Oh, Biden can't talk. He can't finish sentences, or he sniffs little girls." Like he does. I've seen some photos of Biden that are a little creepy, that are
Yeah.
definitely creepy,
No doubt. Yeah.
no doubt. There's no denying that. But
Yeah.
he does fumble through some speeches and things and sentences, and you can definitely tell he's cognitively declining some. There's no doubt about that. Trump is the same way. Okay, Trump constantly just mispronounces words or says the wrong word or fumbles through a speech. And the major difference is though is Biden is a good human being. There's a long quote from Ronald Reagan, and you would think that it would resonate with a lot of Republicans, a lot of Trump supporters, but they're not real Republicans. They're not really into the same things that Ronald Reagan was preaching. Because if you really break it down, they're completely different, Trump and Reagan, on their policies and on who they are as individuals. And the gist of what Reagan was saying is that, you you need in a president, you need someone who's a good human being, good morals. You can in the White House, there's a dime a dozen intelligent people who are policy wonks, who understand economics and understand charts and graphs and data, but you can't rent a sense of morality, a sense of a a good person. That has to be brought to the table by the individual. And Trump does not have that, and he's not gonna get it. I love when people will say, they'll be like, "Oh, he looked presidential today." Like, you're just gonna keep waiting for him to look presidential? It's almost 4 years. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, like he said, when he got elected, I'm going to be the most presidential president ever, and then he comes out and he's campaigning right away, and he's just lying 20 times a day. And I agree. I mean, Reagan, I wasn't, his Reagan's environmental impact, I wasn't a fan of,
Yeah, yeah,
but he had some, and the trickle down economics didn't really work that well. But I agree that he was a much better leader, and I agree that the president is more of a somebody that sort of helps lead the moral compass of the country than the policy guy. Like, that's why we have Congress. That's why we have legislators that are supposed to spend their days coming up with solutions for the American people off of the Constitution. And they say, okay, here's the Constitution. How do we apply what we need today to those rules? And here's what we're going to legislate. And you're right. We've been devoid of leadership in a moral sense for a long time. And if anything, Joe Biden winning will just be like you saw my post about. I don't think Biden should debate Trump at all. I think
yeah,
you should just ignore him. I think you don't argue it or wrestle with a pig and shit because the pig likes it. We're not going to learn anything from the debates. It's just going to be a
yeah,
circus. And then after he gets elected, I think Biden will win. Don't talk again. Don't talk at all. And actually, just let the cabinet, like Biden's cabinet 2020, do the work. And
yeah,
I have confidence that he'll put a strong cabinet together that will be able to help fix what's been going on and reinstate some of the agencies that have been gutted, really at the high levels. And what I've heard is that there's a lot of people that have left those agencies that are waiting to come back, that are really skilled and they are really talented, and they've left because they can't work under the current situation. But just imagine the destruction that's happened within these agencies over the last years. Like, you run a business, I've run a business, I've worked in big corporations. I mean, can you imagine having the CEO switched over every couple months? Like,
oh yeah,
it would ruin, and then the executive team, like, you would get nothing done
yeah,
because every single person comes in and they're like, oh man, we got to this guy now wants us to redo everything. The productivity of the federal government has got to be at almost a standstill compared to what it's been doing in the past many decades. But what I will say is that there's many people that are really skilled and talented that are waiting to come back to these agencies the second that Biden gets elected. So, I think that there's a bright future ahead. These bread lines that they're talking about, yeah, there might be bread lines because if we don't fix what's going on, and that's not because of Biden,
yeah,
it's the same thing that happened to Obama. Honestly, I mean, there's a trend. If you haven't noticed, this whole thing like, oh, Obama was he was all about big, huge deficits. Yeah, he inherited a massive recession from a GOP president. That it wasn't all George W. Bush's fault, but a lot of it was, and there was a lot of problems with the fact that they weren't watching anything that was going on with the banks. So it's like, yeah, okay, well, Obama is he's the debt guy. Well, I almost wish George W. Bush had a third term to just eat it on that, and
yeah,
have to
yeah,
and be like, yeah, George, you had to fix it. And the problem is he wouldn't have fixed it, I don't think, because I don't think he was as good of a president as Obama ended up being. And I
yeah,
think Obama basically fixed that problem over the 8-year course. And we had a recovery. Great. It was great. A lot of people did really well in the stock market. And
yeah,
I'd say Obama's got 3 times the rate of percentage growth, which is what matters in the stock market, versus Donald Trump. And everyone's like, oh, Donald Trump's got the greatest Dow ever. It's like, no, dude, this is about percentage. We're talking about the
Yeah.
percentage growth of your assets.
Yeah.
So Obama's in the 60% range and Trump's in the 20% range. But what I'll finish with on that point is that same thing's going to happen to Biden. So Biden wins, and then all of a sudden, all the problems, and it's like in this weird way, I almost want Trump to win, and I don't think Trump actually wants to win. And don't. I hope that clip doesn't get replayed. But I almost want him to have to fix his own shit
Mm.
because this is a shitstorm, and he's created it, and it's like he's gonna lose the election, and then the Democrats are gonna have to clean it up, and yet it's gonna cost a fortune to fix what's been going on and to correct all the tax laws that were totally broken legislatively. So yeah, taxes are gonna go back up to where they used to be, and it's like, oh, Democrats are taxing again. It's like, yeah, because we are broke. We have to spend massive amounts of money to fix what your GOP president just did, just like GW. And it's the same story. We're living it over and over again. It's
Yeah.
like the
You would think
Republicans,
people would
yeah,
learn. Yeah. Yeah.
no. And they're
I, th-
like, oh, yeah.
I think it's like the last, I want to say it's the last 9 or 10 recessions in America, um, minus Jimmy Carter, I think, were all Republicans.
Carter. Yeah, yeah,
They were all, they were under, all of them were under Republicans. And
yeah,
the one thing is, you know, the, what I don't understand is like the Republicans are way better at branding. They're way better at being on message. They're
Well, when
way
your
better.
message is only one,
Yeah,
when your
they're
message is so simple.
yeah. That's why they're so good. Their topics, their ideas are very simple, and it doesn't take much long form discussion to get into them and to really figure out what's best. So
Right.
those things rise to the top because it's a lot of people can't have these discussions or they don't want to have these discussions. And then you have,
Yeah.
like Fox News and CNN, and these discussions like this aren't conducive to those channels because you only have 5-6 second segments where you got to cram everything in, and then someone else on the other side has to rebut everything you said while at the same time cramming everything they said in, so it just doesn't work out. So a lot of these very simple, you know kind of things of pro Second Amendment, pro life, it's just boom, that's it, this is what we do. There's no nuance to it. We can't have a discussion about how we want to you know kind of tighten gun laws. There's just leave them the way they are. We want to
Right.
do pro life, that's the way it is. And then screw police reform, blue lives matter. Like, it's just all those other things, the other sides, police reform, some sort of restrictions on gun purchases, and being pro-choice but maybe having stipulations on when in the pregnancy you can have an abort. All those things are like way more nuanced
Yeah.
and they're harder
And
to
actually,
market. So they
they
they,
are.
they don't play as well. um and then you have Trump too. He's very simple. Well, if there's one thing he's very good at, he's good at like marketing and branding.
Yeah.
um Very good at that, and that probably comes with his reality TV star kind of persona.
Well,
um
he's been he's been a snake oil salesman his whole life, and people in New York City know that, and I mean, the list of businesses that he started had people invest in and then just dropped them out and either went bankrupt or people lost money. It's amazing. He's been a business failure almost everywhere in his life, and that's why he doesn't want his tax returns out. And
yeah.
there's no doubt about that. And he does not want people to know where his money is and how little he has. That's one thing, but it's not even about how little he has. His debt at the Trump is there. The Trump conglomerate is pretty massive in the billions. Their debt. But anyways, he doesn't want people to know how bad he's been doing at business. I think that's one of his greatest fears, is that people will realize he's a terrible businessman, which they should already.
Yeah.
But anyways, but on the Trump scenario that you're talking about, with just the fact that we've got this person that is, I think, he is a snake oil salesman. If you what I'll say about his approval rating and why the GOP is successful. If you look at, or why they've been able to maintain power, it's because, like you said, they simplify the message, but they have single issue voters. They've got very straight, like they market the fact that they are proud of the fact that they can go and get a voter solely on a single issue. And typically it's pro-life is one, or gun rights. And there's a few other ones, but and sometimes gay marriage and other things like that. But typically pro-life, pro-gun. Which, by the way, I'm not anti-gun. I'm not anti-2A, but I think we need to reform it. And I think that there's ways that we could be better at handling guns in the United States. But what I will say is that they've got these single issue voters, and they're locked in. So if you tell any one of them that this person is pro-choice, they're not voting for him. It doesn't matter what party they are, period. And so when you look at the Trump approval rating, you'll notice compared to any other president, his approval rate is remarkably stable. It never moves. It might go up and down 1 or 2%, but compared to other presidents that can go up and down 15, 20%, like, because there's actual good or bad happening in the world and they're either doing well or poorly.
Yeah.
With Trump, it's like straight across the board, his entire term, it's 40%
Yeah.
straight across. It never really goes up. It never really goes down, because his following are single issue voters. And the other thing is that there's a fragment of his followers that do believe that he is a religious, like some sort of a religious savior that has been brought to them to. And I think what he's done with the courts has been in favor of the evangelical, the far right religious folks that wanted more conservative justices on courts, and they wanted more conservative justices on the Supreme Court. And he's done that for them. So, his court impact is going to be his legacy, no doubt about it, especially at the state level.
Yeah.
With all across the country, like hundreds of people that he's put in that are uber conservative people that are running the court. So, so either way, it's just remarkable to look at his flatline support, and it's people that just literally don't care about what's actually happening. So everybody else is like, from the start, has been like, this guy's crazy and he's totally he's not a good president. Like, nobody would debate that. Like, how could you even say he's a good president? No one would. I don't even think his supporters think he's a good president. And I've talked to a lot of them, and they're like, yeah, I don't actually like him as a person. I don't like really how he acts. I don't really even like some of his policies, but he's he's pro-life and he's pro-gun. And Joe Biden's not. Joe Biden's pro-choice. So I'm voting for Trump. And that's going to be 40% of the vote, period.
Yeah. That type of mentality to me is scary, because you could follow someone to the ends of the earth with that type of mentality, because
Right.
how much worse can it get with Trump being like, we both agree, and I think most people would, that there are some number of dead bodies that are attributed to his administration with COVID. So, like, there are people that are dead because this man is such an incompetent president, and he has
Many more
other
to come, too.
idiots around him. And like, but you'll still vote for him because pro-life. Like, it's, to me, it's just like, it's not a smart way to go about politics. It's not a smart way to go about like a worldview in general.
Not healthy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And and you have, that brings me to the GOP, and the fact that they just enable all of it. All the senators who voted in the impeachment, the senators who, and the House, uh, the congressmen and women who don't say anything or refuse to answer a question when they're asked about some outlandish thing Trump said. They've just continued to enable him. They could have stopped it. They're the only people that really could have stopped it, is his own
Yep.
party. And they never did. And they just keep going with it. And I think the only way, I know, like the Lincoln Project, which is like a group of never Trumpers, they put out a great ad about, basically making all the GOP congressmen pay for what they let happen to the country the last 4 years, and voting them out. And I mean, hopefully Americans have a long enough memory, because damn well when this is over, the second he loses, people like McConnell and Rubio and Lindsey, all these people, they're going to distance themselves from him as if they never supported him, as if they never let
Right.
him get away with anything.
Yeah.
And it's going to be quite the sight to see these people just do that, because they're going to, and we can't let them
Yeah.
get away with it. We have to vote them out. They don't deserve to be in there.
Well, you know,
But
I'm a big Amy McGrath supporter. Sorry, go on.
but yeah, and she, I mean, he would be the biggest one to get out, because I really think like he is just slowly destroying the country. And he's
For
very good at
36
his
years.
job, though. Like, he's very good
Yeah.
at what he does. And he's so, if we could get him out of the Senate, it would be just a huge victory. And and yeah, the GOP in general, I know, you have a take about, you think they're pretty much done.
Yeah. Well, so I do. I've tried to popularize the hashtag GOP is dead. And I truly believe that their party is not going to last that much longer. They might be able to repackage it, so I shouldn't say they're dead, but as we know it today, it's dead. It definitely is. This conservative thread that it has been a, sort of a remarkable failure over the last. Reagan was the last president that you could argue was a Republican and really did well. Um, so actually, no, sorry. HW did a good job.
Mm.
In fairness, I think George W. Bush's father, HW, did a pretty good job, and it was sort of surprising that Clinton won. But anyways, he was not a bad Republican president, But in recent history, at least in my adult life, that I've really been paying attention to politics, the GOP has been like, if I go to ask my niece who's under 10, I won't say exactly how old. I've got three nieces that are under 10. So I could ask them and say, you know, take any topic that is, has some morality behind it. And basically, if their answer is usually going to be on the right side of morals. And to me, the opposition to just any question to them would always be the Republican Party in modern history, right? Like in the last 20 years, it's there's always an ulterior motive, and it's always against what the common person would objectively just say, yep, this the right thing to do is this. And if you just take every zoom out and say on any topic, like let's say, is beating somebody wrong when they're when they're handcuffed and out of, everyone would say, yes, that's wrong, right? But somehow the GOP is always the party that's like, no, we're going to say that it's right somehow.
Yeah.
And like on every topic, they're always the party they're like the party of contrarianism
Yeah.
for dark reasons,
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, well, it's like they're almost a joke, it's like,
Yeah.
you guys can't take yourself serious anymore, right? And like Mitch McConnell's been in for 36 years. We need term limits, first of all. Like, give him 2 terms, that's 12 years. 12 years is plenty. And I would even be willing to say you can be in the Senate for 12 years and then you can be in the House for 12 years. Okay, I'll allow that. Okay, like
Yeah.
you can get 12 years in both. Okay, 24 years, plenty of time. Okay, but I think 12 years should be the max for the Senate because, little known, should be more well known. The Senate wasn't even publicly elected until the early 1900s. Isn't
Oh
that
yeah.
insane? Yeah, and we weren't even electing senators until the 1900s. So they were just literally put in place by the powers that be. Crazy. So yeah, I'm gonna do a post about that actually on TikTok, just to be like, hey, did you know? Like, that's
It is pretty
crazy. Because
crazy.
the Senate, as we found, is incredibly powerful because the Bill Barr and the Senate were the reason why Trump wasn't impeached. And Mueller did the right thing by not saying and making a decision with his paperwork and his summary and his documents, because he did the correct thing, which was to not make a determination.
Hmm.
It was Congress's job to make the determination from his findings. And then Bill Barr comes out and totally misconstrues and misleads the public on really what the document said, and even what Mueller said, which is why Mueller, the silent man, actually publicly said that he was pissed at Barr
Yeah.
about what he said, but and then he mischaracterized what the whole thing was, the Mueller report even said. But the fact that the Senate refused to have testimony from people like forgetting his name now, of course, the guy that was on Fox News, and then he just came out with a book.
Mattis?
Duh. He, no, 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 no. He was in this. He was. Oh, I'm somehow spacing. He just wrote that book that just came out.
Oh yeah,
I
Bolton,
posted about it
John
like
Bolton.
John
Bolton.
Bolton. Oh my god. Sorry, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
long day at work today. I worked all
No, yeah.
weekend, like 10 hour
Yeah.
days. So and it was a good weekend for business, which is good, and I needed it. So
That's good to hear.
but yeah, Bolton. Yeah. So Bolton should have and said he would have testified if they subpoenaed him. And Mitch McConnell knew that he would just be able to block the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So he just said, hey, the truth doesn't matter. And if there's anything that the GOP stands for right now, it's power over truth. They
Mm-hmm.
want, they don't care about truth. They care about power. And that's scary because that's not how political parties are supposed to be. And I think Mitch McConnell is going to lose to Amy McGrath. She is a very moderate, she's almost a conservative Democrat. If any, like she's not quite all the way to being a Democrat in some ways. You know, I like her as a moderate. Like
Yeah.
if the American Moderate Party was a party, I
But
like her as a moderate.
but that's how, I mean, what, it's Kentucky, right? So I mean, you gotta, that's how you got, you're not gonna have
Right.
an AOC is not gonna play in Kentucky. So,
No,
you gotta
and
have
a
a
former
Democrat. Yeah, you gotta have a Democrat that's a little more like just barely center left.
right.
But that's still 10 times better than McConnell. So,
Yeah, and I think and she's pro term limits. Amy McGrath is pro term limits, and we got to hold her to that, and we need to hold the rest of the Senate to that too. We need term limits because people making a career out of politics and making tons of money off of it
yeah, it's
is
part of the
not.
problem
Yeah, I agree.
for sure. Yeah. So, yeah, just a little bit about like, I know you said you were going to start a YouTube at some point. Um, what are
I
your
do have a
plans on
channel.
that? When do you plan on getting that going, and how are you gonna, what is it gonna be mainly about? Is it kind of just gonna be a larger scale of like your TikTok or what?
Yeah, that's the plan. So I do have the channel up. It's the American Moderate on YouTube, and basically it's going to be the second business that I own is a recording studio for podcasting, YouTubing, band recording, and music lessons and digital audio lessons. So how to do a podcast and also how to do digital audio work on YouTube, using Final Cut Pro and all that. So it'll be like a multimedia shop. So the next interview, hopefully, that we do together, one way or another, whichever way
Yeah.
it's going, will be from that studio. I'm about 3-4 weeks away. But that I plan on using as the hub for even some of the in-person interviews that I'll be doing with folks like yourself, where, we're pretty much we're very similar, I think, on the political spectrum of how we sort of look at things, pretty pragmatic. I personally think that, you're I would think that you would be a moderate on a lot of the topics, but I don't know 100% of all of them, but I think most of them we're agreeing on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to interview folks like you to talk about topics that are easy to talk about because we mostly agree, but also interview people that I totally disagree with, along with people that I also totally disagree with on the other end of the spectrum at the same time. So what I really never see is a super liberal person that I can sort of talk down off the edge sometimes too, and then also a super conservative person that I can also sort of talk down off the edge sometimes on an issue. But the two of them talking, you never see ever.
Yeah.
Or if you do, there's bombs going off, and it's not productive, and it's partisan, and it's hyperbole, and it's all personal, or nothing actually gets achieved. So the actual goal of the American Moderate Party what I have listed on the Patreon is basically to bring those two parties, those two factions almost, and those two sides to come to a consensus on how do we want to move forward. Because right now it's polarized. So if it flips to the Democrats, now you're pissing off the other half of the country, and now so they're just pissed for 4 years. And it's like, we do not have to have our political system operate this way.
Yeah.
And it's always a power grab. So instead, let's talk about, hey, super conservative person, hey, super liberal person, I'm going to be here in the middle to make sure everybody talks about this in a productive way. But I want to talk about how do we, because I know we all agree that there's issues with guns. What is the best path forward that we can agree on to have some progress? I'm not talking about getting rid of guns, and I'm not talking about having guns everywhere. I'm talking about what is the best path forward that you both can agree on to have an incremental improvement to our current situation. And I need to find, that's what I want to use that for, is to find what those answers are that both sides can agree on and talk it out and say like, well, why do you really think what you think? I'm not saying it to publicize one thing or another. I really want to know, because I don't feel that way. I want to know, why do you truly believe what you believe? And that's to the liberals and to the conservatives. Like, sometimes I don't agree with either of them on a lot of things, and I'm like, let's figure it out. Why do you truly feel that? Like, what's the basis? And then, by the way, you guys currently need to come up with a solution together in a collaborative way to solve this problem, and we're not leaving it until you figure it out.
Yeah.
And or that might take months. And in the end, the goal is, from those conversations with many people on many of these core sort of policy initiatives and platform topics really for a party, is that once I get the best case scenario for every major issue that is out there, which will take years, but that will be the ultimate platform of the American Moderate Party. So I don't think that it's not going to be about my personal opinion for the American Moderate Party. Although if there's something I firmly disagree with it, obviously I can't endorse that being part of the party.
Yeah.
But I don't think that will happen. So I think it'll be more of a consensus movement and be the best path forward and what we all actually really want without alienating either side. And something that I think people can get behind. So I think there's a possibility that if there's enough of a following over the next year, let's say, and I get enough traction with this, and I can get enough bullet point policy points down in the platform, that there's a possibility that I can register with the FEC, with American Moderate Party, and in some states, and possibly, who knows, even run for the House or something. Not me, but somebody could run for the House in one of these parties. Right, for the AMP party. Sorry, I lost my earbud. So somebody could potentially run in 2 years. But I think that's unlikely. The real ultimate goal is 2024, to have some play in 2024. And I think you could see. I mean, I'm not in love with Biden. I'm not in love with the Democratic Party. I've always been independent, and I think the Democratic Party is the quintessential lesser of two evils. And so in the end, I'm like, well, let's come up with something better, and not to take away any prestige from the Democratic Party of maybe going for 2 terms if Biden wins. But I think we could actually present a real legitimate third party that will not be a sabotage to the Democratic Party, but could actually win a majority. And I'm talking like an actual majority, not a plurality of the vote in 4 years. So that's the goal. And everyone's like, that's crazy. That'll never happen. Like, you're crazy. And I'm like, well, you know what? I don't see any reason why it's crazy, because I think it's possible. And again, it's not about me. It's really about just what we can do collectively with both sides. So that's the rundown.
Yeah. It's definitely a tall order, but it's something that honestly, like, just has to be done at some point. We can't keep doing what we're doing every 4 or 8 years, and having like the gun debate, for instance. You have one people on the one side that are, they want to put a gun in every teacher's hand in every classroom in the country, and then you have the other side who wants to abolish the Second Amendment. Well, I mean, there's got to be somewhere where we're like, we can do this better with tweaking on the edges here.
Yeah. And what I will say too about just real briefly is that if the party gets a following, right, and it even, let's say I can register it as a party, but it doesn't get enough traction to actually be a viable third party, we can at least put that engine behind a third party that is relevant in 2024. So sorry, I interrupted you, but
no, yeah, it makes definitely makes sense. And when you said you have like a few weeks until you're gonna start, you'll have the studio ready and start actually recording things.
Yep. Yeah. So, drywall's up, electrical just got done, HVAC just got done. I mean, during the pandemic, I was over there working, doing as much as I could myself, like the installation for soundproofing and a lot of the gutting. you know, a lot of painting. I've done everything I possibly could to save a buck. But I was like, I love on TikTok when all these guys are like, "Oh, you're some liberal in your parents' basement," and I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
dude, I've been working through the entire pandemic, and then once that was done, I've been working at my brick and mortar like 8 hours a day minimum, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
So like you all might have been quarantined. I was quarantined, but I was working in a like
I love that
big.
one too. The old you're living in your parents' basement one. If you on TikTok,
I
one
don't know
thing
why they love that so much.
is
Yeah,
on TikTok, like, you know, a lot of the insults and comments that I get, I'm sure you get them too. They're just insults. They're ad hominems. They're just towards
yeah,
you. They're like almost 99% of the time they are. Maybe like 1% of the time they actually say something about like one of your arguments or one of your ideas, but most of the time
right.
it's just some sort of insult thrown at you. And
Yeah.
you know, from
It's hyperbole. Yeah,
yeah, and from having my YouTube and TikTok and Twitter, and I'm the youngest of two brothers, so I'm used to getting insults, man. Like, it doesn't matter. Like,
uh,
it doesn't bother me. Like it like and then like a lot of times, you know, if I see like certain things on my TikTok or certain things on my YouTube, it's just like an immediate block. I'm like, this is a complete waste of time. I'm not gonna even.
yeah,
It's just block. Like, so it just
yeah.
makes it
I
a
mean,
little
I've
easier.
heard. I had some followers that I sort of on TikTok. I usually will, unless somebody's totally hyperbolic or somebody's totally, you know, off the rails, you know, violent. I've seen a lot of threats to people responding to my videos and to me, and I'm like, I'm just not gonna keep that out online, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just don't approve of people threatening other people.
yeah,
Um, so I just take those down. People I disagree with enough, but they're not violent, I'll block them and their comment will stay. You know, so I don't delete their comment. I just block them from responding again, and then other
yeah,
people respond to them. That's fine, but I just don't want them in the future just thrown out total propaganda. And that's I'll
yeah,
make like I'll let people say Trump 2020 all day. I'll let people say that I'm an idiot all day. I'll let people say like Biden's a total whatever. But once there's a line that gets crossed
hmm,
where it's clearly propaganda and where it's counterproductive to everyone reading the comments if they are, that once that line is crossed, I'll actually block them.
yeah,
And there's been a few followers I had that were I know are I've got a lot of followers that are Republicans that have told me in direct messages and also publicly in the comments that you know they're very conservative Republicans, but they actually might consider becoming a part of AMP if the platform goes in the way that they're hoping. So I have hope that we can bring some people together here, and the liberals are going to be just as hard to bring to the party. I know that.
yeah,
But what I will say is that there's been a few people that have sort of outed that they're very, they're like some of the Q folks or some of the, just our talking points that would come from somebody way more extreme than Rush Limbaugh type comments that are just getting regurgitated. And I don't think they're bots. They're real people that are just, I think, a bit misled. And I just can't give them airtime. And I just
yeah.
yesterday, a guy that followed me probably since I had 400 followers, and now I think I'm around 8,000 or something in the last 3 months or so. We started around the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I saw yours like blew up over like a few weeks.
Yeah, you know what it was. It's been like pretty steady. It's a couple hundred followers a day most days, which I'm sort of shocked by. Some days it's 40 or 50. It's kind of crazy. I've been surprised, and I've actually been so busy working, I haven't been putting up a lot of content, so it's sort of slowed a little bit. But people that were with me from the start, uh, from like when I was under 1,000 people that were actually watching my stuff at any regularity. But one of them I had to block yesterday because the stuff that he was saying, I was like, this is like, what is wrong? Like, there's something wrong with you,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's totally counterproductive. And then people start responding to it, and it's giving it airtime. And it's like, no, 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 we don't want to spend time debating something that is 1,000%
yeah,
propaganda
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or like
or
one of mine
conspiracy.
is the conspiracy theories. Like if I see someone come on there and they start talking about like Hillary Clinton is like she like, you know, is a pedophile, or the pizza parlor thing, or like
Yeah.
QAnon. If I see these comments, like I just immediately block you. Like it's just like you said, it's
I'll
just
learn. I mean,
it's not
yeah.
it's not worth my time. It's not worth anyone in my comments time. You're not adding anything positive to the conversation, and like people like that, you're not going to change their mind. So I honestly think the only way we can like actually defend against people like that is ignore them and outnumber them. You outnumber them at the polls and ignore them everywhere else.
It's funny. There's been a lot of traction with like one thing that I find very odd is that this whole QAnon thing, which I actually spent very little time researching. I've looked at a couple of the videos and I've looked at some of the written word from people that aren't part of QAnon about QAnon. So I've read sort of journalistic reviews of it and like what it's all about from people that did spend a lot of time researching it. Because the stuff I did watch was like 5G is killing all of us.
Yeah.
Things that, well, all right, well, why in Zimbabwe where there's no 5G does everyone have coronavirus right now? It's like, things aren't really lining up. But I will say I'm not like totally against conspiracy stuff. Like I don't just outwardly say like, okay, everything is conspiracy. Like the movie Zeitgeist, for instance.
Mhm.
Yeah, man, I'm yeah, I like that movie. So, and I believe a lot of what's in that movie. And so it's not that I'm anti conspiracy necessarily, because I do think that there are legitimate problems with the system that has been indoctrinated in the powers that be. So I know that there's people that are like, okay, QAnon is this real thing, and. But what I will say is that, well, why wasn't he talking about Trump hanging out with Epstein? And
Yeah.
why are they saying that this is all anti, uh, you know, uh, it's all like about what's the word, like child abuse and stuff, and
Yeah.
there's this child abuse ring, and the Clintons are in on it and all that, and I'm like, yeah, well, what about Trump? This guy was hanging out with Epstein on his island,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so and then their thing is like, well, researching, he was researching Epstein, is what they say. Like he was learning so that he could get him. And I'm like, first of all, Epstein didn't kill himself in jail.
Yeah.
The powers, I do believe that the powers that be, yeah, they got him. Like I don't think that Epstein killed himself. Let's just put that
Yeah,
out
that
there.
that one definitely is a little fishy for sure.
Oh yeah, dude, he was gonna talk and he was gone. And that's the scary thing about the world, is that like people that do have that level of power can I think do things like that. And who knows? I wasn't there, but I don't think he killed himself. But what I will say on that thread is that the people that are really upset about the Clintons, or the people that are doing all these this, that, and the other. Well, you got to look at it like, for instance, like people that say, well, look at the Epstein and Trump thing as, they'll sort of, like you said, the Trump followers are a cult, or as you framed it, like they just will always blindly follow what he says, or they'll apologize for what he says. So this Epstein thing is a perfect example of that. Well, he was there to research, and there was a comedian one time, I forget who it was, who said who was talking about dinosaur bones, and there's a religious person that's like, and he was like, well, what about dinosaur bones? And the guy's like, well, God put them there to test our faith, and that's sort of the thing with the Epstein thing. It's like, well, you're, no matter what the truth is, they're hard lined. Like, no,
Yeah.
Trump would. There's no way he would do it. So what is a possible reason? Oh, he was actually trying to catch Epstein. That's why. So it's like there's never going to be any accountability for him with his faith, because they'll apologize for him in whatever capacity possible. Matt, come
For
up here,
sure.
buddy.
For sure. Be mindful of your time. We've been like about 90 minutes or so.
Max ready
Uh,
for a walk?
yeah. It was
No, this has been great talking about it, man. It's a lot,
no,
lot to
yeah.
talk about.
Yeah, it's I mean I'm sure we have plenty more that we can discuss too. We can
Yeah,
do it another time. Maybe when your studio gets up and going, we can
sure.
have another one here.
Yeah,
Yeah, but thanks for joining me, coming on here and discussing these things. Look forward to more of your TikToks there and your YouTube when that starts.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
So
The
yeah.
American Moderate Party. So the name of the YouTube is the American Moderate Party. So I did put party on that one.
Okay.
And I think that that could potentially be used for the actual party if it does become one. Whereas the Patreon is the American Moderate and the TikTok is the American Moderate. So you'll see it, but it's all the same logo, AMP, AMP.
Okay. Yep.
So
And I'll put all the relevant links there in the description here. Anyone can see them. Click on them, take them right to your Patreon, YouTube, TikTok, and
awesome, man.
everything.
Thank you.
But yeah, good talking to you, man.
Yeah, definitely. Pittelli, you're the man. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.